Hi there, I'm Cherie. After 23 years with the same company, I was fired, just one day before my retirement. No warning, no thank you, just gone. But that wasn't the hardest part. The people I called friends turned silent. My daughter got dragged into it. And the same boss who shook my hand at the Christmas party showed up at my door with a threat. I stayed quiet for too long. But then I made one call, and everything changed. What did I say? And why did it scare them more than anything else? Friday began like any other, with the familiar scent of my morning coffee and the soft hum of the kitchen light overhead. I pulled into the company lot just past 8, same spot I'd parked in for over 2 decades. My retirement countdown was down to hours. By Monday, I'd be free. Or so I thought. The office buzzed quietly. People offered small nods. Some even smiled. But no one said congrats or last day. That should have tipped me off. I shrugged it off, poured myself a cup of stale break room coffee, and returned to my desk. One final compliance audit to double-check, and I'd be done. I even had a lunch plan with Denise, though she hadn't confirmed yet. By 10:13 a.m., I received an email from Clyde's assistant. Director Hedrick would like to see you at 10:30 sharp. That was strange. Clyde never summoned me. Hell, he barely knew my name until a month ago. His office was all glass and silence, like a zoo exhibit for predators. He gestured for me to sit, then leaned back in his leather chair with the fake casual tone I'd grown to hate in executives. "How long have you been with us, Cherie?" 23 years. My voice was steady. My stomach wasn't. Impressive, really. He opened a manila folder with surgical precision. "But, due to budget realignment, today will be your last day." I blinked. "What?" "You'll be escorted out by 11 o'clock. This is your severance." He slid the folder across the desk, still not meeting my eyes. "If you sign this by tomorrow, you'll receive 3 months' pay." 3 months? I looked at the folder but didn't touch it. My pension vests Monday. He exhaled like I was inconveniencing him. "Look, this isn't personal. It's business. You've had a good run." I didn't speak, didn't scream. I stood up, straightened my blazer, and walked out. I didn't give him the satisfaction. Back at my desk, I packed slowly. My daughter's framed graduation photo. A mug that said, "I survived Compliance Week 2011. My husband's photo. He died before seeing me reach retirement. I glanced around. No one made eye contact. Cowards. Janet from HR stood nearby, pretending not to cry. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It is what it is." But inside, I was a ticking bomb. At home, I stared at the folder. 3 months' pay. In exchange for my silence, for walking away just before my pension activated, they'd planned this. Carefully. Clyde didn't just get lucky with timing, he struck with intention. It rained that evening. The kind of cold, biting rain that stung through your coat. I just finished making tea when the doorbell rang. I knew who it was before I looked. Clyde stood on my porch in that overpriced coat, holding a fresh set of papers. "I thought maybe you'd prefer to talk without the office pressure," he said, as if this were a friendly visit. "I'm not signing anything. You should reconsider." His tone dipped lower. "A legal route would be unfortunate." I opened the door just long enough to say, "Leave." He placed the folder in my mailbox and walked away, shoes splashing in the puddles. I watched until he turned the corner. As I stood there in silence, watching him walk away, I didn't feel afraid, just ready. The next morning, I stood by the kitchen window, still in my robe, watching the clouds crawl low over the hills. I hadn't slept. Not because I was afraid, but because my mind refused to shut up. There was no denying it anymore. Clyde's visit wasn't a whim. It was part of something much bigger. And somewhere deep down, I knew they'd started laying this out long before yesterday. It brought me back to a conversation I'd buried. About a year ago, I'd handed in a compliance report that raised too many red flags in too short a time. Faulty expense approvals, conflicting vendor codes, irregular invoice numbers. It was technical, sure, but damning. I remember walking out of the meeting when Brenda Sabo from HR followed me down the hall. "You should probably slow it down," she said gently, as if she were warning me not to overwater my plants. "Excuse me?" Brenda glanced around before leaning closer. "Reports like that? They make people nervous." I remember laughing it off. People should be nervous. That's how you fix things. She didn't laugh with me. Looking back now, that was the first crack in the glass. Over the next few months, the more I reported, the less I heard back. I'd send memos to the senior VP's assistant. Silence. I escalated it to legal. I received a vague acknowledgement and never heard another word. Once I even copied Clyde on an email about backdated compliance logs. His reply? One sentence. Please focus on your core responsibilities. By the time I hit my 20th ignored report, I started keeping copies for myself. At home. Just in case. What I didn't expect was for the people around me to go quiet too. Dennis from finance used to grab coffee with me every Friday. Suddenly, he was always slammed. Elise, who once baked me a cake for my birthday, stopped replying to my team's messages. And Brenda? She was the one who haunted me most. 3 months ago, I'd tried to loop her into a follow-up on that original flagged report. Her email bounced back. Out on personal leave, the auto reply read. Then came the whispers. She's not coming back. Her office was emptied overnight. Don't ask about Brenda. I checked the company directory 2 days later. Her name was gone. No announcement, no farewell, just gone. I stared at the space where her door used to be, now reassigned to someone in procurement. That's when it hit me. This wasn't incompetence. This was calculated. They weren't just ignoring my warnings. They were removing anyone who listened. They weren't just ignoring me. They were removing the pieces around me, one by one. The wind outside had picked up just before midnight. I sat in my office, the only light coming from the desk lamp, its soft yellow glow casting long shadows on the walls. I hadn't moved much since dinner. Just sat, thinking. Thinking about Brenda. About how one by one every voice around me had gone quiet. The walls had ears, but none had mouths anymore. I reached under the lowest shelf of the bookcase and pulled forward an old family album. Behind it was a fireproof metal box, gray, heavy, and untouched for years. I'd first started storing documents in there after my third ignored report, not out of fear, out of instinct. Inside, I found rows of labeled folders, handwritten notes, printed email chains, meeting minutes, expense ledgers, flagged spreadsheets with margin scribbles in red. Some had my signature, some had others, and all of it painted the same picture. A company playing fast and loose with numbers to look more profitable than it really was. This wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. I spent the next few hours reviewing everything, laying pages across the table like pieces of a puzzle, only I had the patience to solve. Each document was a conversation no one wanted to have, a warning no one wanted to hear. And as I worked, I couldn't help but think of Harold. We used to joke we were the company's conscience. Birthday donuts in the break room, shared frustration over system crashes. Then one day, he stopped laughing, stopped talking. When I asked if something was wrong, he just said, "Don't get yourself noticed." Denise, too. She once brought me soup when I was out sick. Now she wouldn't even look me in the eye at the copier. These people weren't evil, they were scared. Just like Brenda had been, right before she vanished. By 3 a.m., I'd created 3 copies of the full file, labeled clearly, one for my own records, one for outside counsel, one I hadn't decided on yet, maybe a journalist, maybe someone in Washington, someone who gave a damn. I slid them into separate padded envelopes, sealed them tight, and wrote the date on each. Not a dramatic act. Not some grand gesture, just quiet steps toward the inevitable. I didn't have allies anymore, but I had the truth, and that would have to be enough. The envelopes sat neatly on the edge of my desk, like quiet witnesses. Dawn filtered through the blinds, and I hadn't slept more than 2 hours. But I didn't feel tired, just sharp. The kind of alertness that comes when the fear finally burns out and something colder takes its place. Decision. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table. The phone lay next to me, screen dark. My thumb hovered over a contact I hadn't touched in years. Frank Jude. We'd worked together back when he was still CFO, before he took the SEC job. He always read my reports top to bottom, even when others called them overkill. He never said much, but he didn't need to. He acted when others stalled. I tapped his name. It rang longer than I liked, but he picked up. Cherie? His voice carried the weight of someone who already suspected why I was calling. I need to talk, I said. Not later. Monday. I figured this day would come, he replied quietly. Tell me what you've got. I didn't tell him everything, just enough to lay the groundwork, enough for him to know I wasn't exaggerating. I could hear him taking notes, already processing the legal landmines. We agreed to meet Monday morning. Quiet location, no trail. You sure you want to do this? He asked. They left me no choice, I said. By early evening, I was back at my old laptop, checking dates, comparing versions of internal reports. That's when I saw it. A new email. No sender, no subject. Just one line of text. You're not wrong. Check Q2 reports, June 14th. Signed, NQ17. I stared at the screen, my pulse suddenly spiking. This wasn't spam. Someone was watching, or helping, or both. I pulled up the files from that date, and it didn't take long. A revenue jump that made no mathematical sense, rubber-stamped by Martin Godwin. The same Martin who once called my concerns overly technical. It was right there. Backdated approval logs, signed the day after the report was supposedly finalized. By Sunday afternoon, I'd restructured the files with clean annotations, added side memos linking the forged entries, and highlighted every reference to Martin. I wasn't just building a case anymore. I was drawing a roadmap. I uploaded the backup files to 2 cloud drives and slipped the flash drive into my purse. If someone on the inside had just whispered the truth, then maybe I wasn't walking into that building alone after all. By sunrise Monday, I was already dressed and parked outside the federal building. The rain from yesterday had dried, but the air still carried the kind of chill that made your skin tighten. I wasn't nervous. I was done being nervous. It was time. Frank met me in the lobby and led me up to a small glass-walled conference room. 2 SEC agents sat waiting, their files already open. One introduced herself as Brennan, the other as Weston. Formal, but not cold. They listened, they took notes, and more importantly, they believed me. I walked them through everything. Timelines, signatures, forged approvals, and of course, the June 14th discrepancy tied to Martin Godwin. I showed them the email from NQ17. Brennan raised an eyebrow. That's internal, she muttered. We'll trace it, carefully. By the time I walked out of that building, I knew I'd done the right thing, even if it was going to get worse before it got better. That afternoon, I found 2 new voicemails and 1 email from Varden Tech's legal team. All variations of the same offer, a short-term consulting contract with generous compensation in exchange for my signature on a confidentiality agreement. I could practically hear Clyde's voice in the fine print. Let's keep this quiet, Cherie. Be reasonable. Reasonable was for people who didn't have proof. I didn't respond. I forwarded the message to Frank, then powered off my phone. Later that evening, I pulled out my old company-issued laptop to cross-reference some files one last time. I hadn't used it since Friday, but something didn't feel right. The fan kicked on, louder than usual, even though no apps were open. I checked the processes, hidden services running in the background. And then I saw it. A shadow program logging every keystroke, every microphone access, every camera activation, all dated back at least 3 months. They'd been watching me. My breath caught for half a second, but rage overrode everything else. This wasn't just surveillance, it was violation. They knew what they were doing. They'd crossed every line. I ripped the network cable from the port, shut the lid, and placed the laptop in a Faraday bag I'd bought a year ago but hoped I'd never use. They tried to buy my silence, but now I was buying time, to strike first. The next morning, just as I finished my second cup of coffee, my phone rang. It was Delphine. She rarely called this early, text maybe, but her voice was tight, panicked. Mom, I got an email from some weird address. It said, "Do you really know what your mother's hiding?" What the hell is going on? I stood up so fast the chair scraped across the floor. Did you click anything? Open any links? No, she said. But I'm freaked out. Why would someone send this to me? Forward it to me, right now, and don't respond to anything, no matter what comes next. That wasn't a scare tactic. That was a declaration of war. They didn't just want to silence me. They wanted to rattle me by threatening what mattered most. By late afternoon, Delphine was at my doorstep, coat half zipped, face pale and lined with confusion. "I need answers," she said, walking past me without waiting for an invite. We sat at the dining table. I watched her eyes scan my living room like she was looking for a truth I'd hidden in the furniture. "Are you in danger? Am I in danger?" she demanded. "I'm doing what's right," I said calmly. "But right now, that's making a few powerful people very nervous." "So this is about your job, about you being fired?" "It's about something that's been broken for a long time," I said, "and I refuse to be part of it." Her jaw clenched. "You should have told me." I looked her in the eye. "Would you have understood?" She hesitated. That pause said everything. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then I got up and brought over a folder. Not the full case, just enough. Emails, signatures, dates that didn't line up. Notes in margins. The same kind of paper trail that would have looked like noise to anyone else. Delphine flipped through them slowly. Her hands stopped shaking by the third page. "Mom, this is big." I nodded. "You're not paranoid. You're a damn lighthouse in a storm." She reached for my hand. "I'm scared, but I've got your back." That night we didn't sleep. She helped me double-check documents. I taught her how to encrypt files. I showed her where the extra copies were hidden. They tried to break me by threatening my daughter. They just made sure I'd burn it all down instead. By dawn, I thought I'd regained control. But they were always one step ahead, until now. Wednesday morning started with coffee and chaos. My phone buzzed non-stop with messages, links, screenshots. The headlines hit all at once. Disgruntled ex-employee targets former company. Cherie Rasmussen fabricated claims after losing promotion. Sources say she was difficult, obsessive. All quoting anonymous insiders. The timing wasn't a coincidence. This was a smear campaign, engineered, approved, and launched with precision. They wanted the public to believe I was unstable, bitter, a liar with an agenda. But what stung wasn't the lies. It was seeing my name dragged through mud I never touched. Before noon, I got a call from Frank. His tone was off. "I need to tell you something," he said, voice lowered. "I've been pulled. Internal ethics flagged me for conflict of interest." I gripped the phone tighter. "What kind of conflict?" "They said my past connection to Vardentech, my CFO history, could bias the case. I've been reassigned. Effective immediately." I paused. "You think this is pressure from the top?" "I know it is, but it won't last. You've got the documents. They can't erase what you've collected." After we hung up, I stared at the wall. My only inside contact was now sidelined. They were isolating me again. Just like Brenda. Just like Harold. Like clockwork. But they underestimated what I had planned for this exact moment. I opened the drawer next to my desk and pulled out the backup dossier I hadn't touched yet, the one labeled Media Route. I made encrypted copies and sent them to 3 journalists I trusted. Old school reporters with a spine, people who didn't shy away from corporate fire. I didn't need headlines. I needed facts out in the wild. The package included a timeline of falsified financials, scanned copies of internal memos marked confidential, and a detailed log of ignored compliance flags from the last 4 years. If they thought I would break under pressure, they clearly hadn't read my files. By Thursday at 6 a.m., my phone was vibrating nonstop on the nightstand. News alerts, emails, missed calls. The whistleblower dossier had hit the front page of 3 national outlets. By 7:15, it was on cable news. Anchors said words I'd waited years to hear. Falsified ledgers, fraudulent audit trails, whistleblower testimony corroborated. They named names: Clyde Hedrick, Martin Godwin, and me. They played excerpts from the reports I'd sent, diagrams I'd spent nights creating. It wasn't sensationalized. It was surgical, sharp, devastating. Clyde responded the only way he knew how: damage control. That afternoon, the board called an emergency meeting. I knew about it before they even finished ordering sandwiches. I wasn't there, of course, but someone was, and they recorded it. The audio leaked by evening. You could hear Clyde's voice cracking, hear Martin say, "We had to contain the fallout, even if it meant isolating her." Another voice cut in, "We never expected she'd go public. That was the mistake." Click. Play again. The line that mattered? The reports were scrubbed. That's on record. By Friday morning, the SEC was swarming Varden Tech. 2 board members resigned before lunch. Martin's name was stripped from every page of the corporate site. Clyde, indicted for securities fraud, was escorted out the back door. I didn't go on TV, didn't give interviews. I wasn't looking for fame, just accountability. Reporters camped outside my street, but I stayed inside with Delphine. She kept checking the news like she was trying to prove to herself this was real. I sat on the porch, holding a mug of now cold tea, listening to the quiet crumble of a machine that once believed it was untouchable. Justice wasn't a finish line, it was a door, and I was the one who'd unlocked it. 2 weeks later, I sat in the back of a quiet courtroom as Clyde stood before a judge, his lawyer speaking fast, sweat beading at his temple. The charges were read: securities fraud, obstruction, conspiracy. Martin wasn't there. He'd already resigned from every board he sat on and vanished from public life like a ghost ducking from sunlight. The headlines had cooled, but the fallout hadn't. Varden Tech's stock had started to recover, but trust? That wasn't bouncing back anytime soon. They tried to make me disappear. Instead, I became the reason the house of cards collapsed. That afternoon, a courier arrived at my door with an envelope from Varden Tech. Inside was a formal offer. Ethics consultant, they called it. Full pension, back pay, even a seat at the table for future reforms. I didn't even finish reading it. I slid it back into the envelope, walked it to the trash can, and dropped it in without ceremony. Power on their terms wasn't peace, it was bait. I'd lived under their rules long enough. Instead, I made a different choice. A month later, I found myself standing at a folding table in the community center, a dry erase board behind me, a group of young professionals in front of me. I wasn't teaching them how to get ahead. I was teaching them how not to lose themselves. Delphine sat in the back, arms crossed, smiling. We weren't just mother and daughter now. We were allies. I'd lost colleagues. My name had been dragged. I'd had my privacy invaded, my loyalty mocked, but I'd also found clarity, and in that clarity I found peace. Not everyone pays for what they do, but some do. And more importantly, people see it. I never set out to destroy anyone. I only wanted to protect what mattered, and now, finally, I could. Before I close this chapter for good, let me share something from one woman to another, from someone who spent 23 years believing loyalty would protect her. What I learned is this: silence doesn't buy you peace, it rents you fear. And the truth? It may not be welcomed, but it will outlast every lie. If you ever find yourself standing alone, cornered, unheard, remember this story. Stand anyway, even when your knees shake, even when the people you trusted vanish one by one. Because doing the right thing isn't about being applauded. It's about knowing you can sleep at night with your integrity intact. I didn't burn bridges. I lit a path. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever spoken up when it cost you something? Have you ever stayed silent when you wished you hadn't? Or maybe you're facing something right now, something that requires more courage than comfort. If this story moved you, drop a 1 in the comments, or tell me what state or country you're watching from. If it didn't connect with you, I'm okay with that too. Let me know why and where you're tuning in from. I want this to be a space where stories spark real talk. And if you want to hear more stories like this, real, raw, and resilient, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Let's keep the conversation going.